Today, we're going to check out 5 absolutely horrifying secrets you were never meant to know. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about how absolutely terrifying the ocean is. For starters, over 80% of the ocean remains unexplored. We simply don't have the technology to reach most of the ocean. Approximately 99% of recorded underwater sounds are not identifiable. We can't explain them. What are they? Where do they come from? What's creating them? We don't have the answers. Hydrophones are underwater microphones that are used to pick up ocean sounds across the globe. You see, these devices pick up low-frequency noises that travel across vast distances underwater. Think whales, earthquakes, volcanoes, icebergs, it picks up all of them. But despite its amazing capabilities, hydrophones often detect sounds that don't fit known patterns. Be it natural or unnatural, we just don't know. Is it simply undiscovered marine life? Unknown human activity under the sea? Undiscovered geological phenomenon? Godzilla? Your guess is as good as mine. And if you weren't already freaked out by the ocean, how about I give you one more horrifying detail? The ocean is actually a graveyard to forgotten viruses. Trillions upon trillions of them, many of which have never been studied before. And these viruses are lying dormant in the ocean, just waiting to be discovered. In fact, the actual estimated number of viruses in the ocean that are undiscovered, this is given to us by scientists, get ready for this, is more than 10 nonillion viruses, which is 10 followed by 31 zeros. As in, more viruses in the ocean than there are stars in the universe. Absolutely horrifying. Let's talk about one of the craziest experiments ever conducted that you've probably never heard of. It was an experiment that created a ghost. A real-life ghost. And no, I'm not joking. The Philip experiment, where a group of Canadian researchers set out to prove just how powerful belief can be, where they literally manifested a ghost. Between 1973 and 1974, a group of Canadian parapsychologists decided to test a wild theory. Could the human mind, through collective focus and belief, actually create a ghost? To find out, they invented Philip Aylesford, a completely fictional character with a tragic backstory. Philip was a 17th century nobleman who fell in love with a gypsy woman. When his wife discovered the affair, she accused the woman of witchcraft. Because of societal norms at the time, Philip was unwilling or unable to defend her, so she was burned at the stake. Philip was consumed by guilt and ultimately threw himself from the battlements of his family estate, ending his life. Of course, none of this was real. Philip was purely a figment of their imagination, but the group wanted to see if their collective focus could manifest him. And boy did it. The group began meeting regularly, sitting around a table in a traditional seance setting. At first, it was all silence. Nothing happened. Weeks passed, and it seemed like the experiment might fail. But then, the knocking started. It began softly, like someone tapping on the top of the table. They asked questions, and Philip responded with knocks. 1 knock for yes, 2 knocks for no. They even heard knocks coming from other parts of the room, as if something or someone was moving around them. As the sessions continued, things escalated. The table vibrated violently. Lights in the room flickered on and off spontaneously. On one occasion, the table slid across the room. There was one time where the table levitated off the floor right in front of multiple witnesses. Participants even reported a chilling presence in the room, as if someone was there that they couldn't see.
We were very careful to try and avoid hoaxes. On several occasions we had what are called doily nights, where we would put doilies, paper doilies, under the hands of the members, and if they tried pushing the table, the doilies would simply slide across the table. So clearly the table movements were not caused by anyone pushing it. And the cameras, when we had those opportunities to videotape it, it was clear that, say, 2 people sitting on opposite sides of the table, if they both lifted their knees, might lift the table up. It was clear that that was not happening either.
And these are just a few of the experiences that they felt during this experiment. It didn't stop there. Philip, despite being fictional, seemed to have a personality. He was playful. If they joked around or laughed, the knocks grew louder, as though Philip was laughing along with them. The group was shocked. They had literally invented Philip, yet here he was, interacting with them, moving the table, and manifesting strange phenomena all around them. This wasn't a random trick. We know this because the experiment continued for months, and the results were consistent. They concluded that their collective focus and belief had somehow manifested Philip. He was something created by their minds, a projection of their shared intention. It's as if through manifestation itself, Philip became real. This wasn't just a one-time experiment. Not only did this last for months, it was also replicated 2 other times. One time was a recreation of the Philip experiment with new participants and a new fictional ghost. Just as before, the new group reported table movements, knocking sounds, and an ominous presence. This was yet again a controlled experiment that seemingly showed there being a connection between collective focus and physical manifestations. Another time was the Humphrey experiment, which took place in 2004 in the UK. This was conducted as part of a university dissertation, where researchers created a new fictional ghost named Humphrey. And guess what? It had similar results. Strange anomalies and unexplained temperature drops were recorded. Strange knocking sounds. While skeptics remain, the repeated results raise serious questions about whether human intention, focus, and belief can produce real, tangible results in the physical world. So, are ghosts real? Well, I guess that comes down to if you believe they are, you just might manifest one into existence. It's a pretty incredible idea that reality is whatever you make it. But it's also pretty horrible considering how many people out there have horrible ideas. This honestly might explain so much about the world. What do you mean my bank knows the size of my lungs? Let's start at the beginning. Essentially, your bank records every phone call you make to them. Plenty of them don't actually say it up front. In fact, Bank of America got in trouble for doing just that back in 2017 and had to pay a settlement of over $1 million for violating California law and not saying explicitly, hey, we're recording you. But this gets way creepier. Creditcards.com explained that 3 out of the 4 major banks in the United States actually analyze these recorded calls with a technology called phone printing. This phone printing technology analyzes and assesses 147 characteristics of each call, including a person's voice, the type of phone being used, the location of the call, the pitch and tone of your voice, as well as the size of the caller's lungs. I'm not joking. I really, truly, seriously wish I was, but I'm not joking. Don't fret though, they say this is not for any nefarious reason, but rather to prevent credit card fraud as a service on your behalf. That way if someone tries to steal your identity, this voice analyzing software can compare their voice, tone, pitch, and yes, lung size, and hopefully root out any of those imposters. How do you feel about that? You've probably heard of 23andMe before. It's one of those mail-in DNA kits. You know, you spit in a tube, mail it in, and find out where your family came from. Well, supposedly. There's a lot of iffy stories out there about the validity of these results, but nonetheless, everyone has heard of these kits. It's a super cool idea in theory. You can learn about your past, maybe connect to other family members you didn't know about, and even see where you came from. But there has always been an unsettling angle to it. There aren't really any privacy protections after you give up your genetic information. Once it's sent, who knows where it goes and what it's used for? There have been cases where criminals have been caught because of similar family DNA matches. Maybe the criminal didn't actually submit his genetic data, but his brother or dad did. So that's a little creepy, but it did help solve a crime, so what's the issue? The issue is that the people that held this data willingly and happily gave it over to the authorities, which from a privacy point of view is really unsettling. A 23andMe spokesperson has said previously, "We don't share your data," but all signs point to that not being entirely accurate. In fact, one case was of a woman who sent in her DNA, but within a few weeks she actually got a call from out-of-state cops regarding a murder victim. It turned out that her distant cousin was killed years back and was considered a Jane Doe, as in a woman that couldn't be identified. But somehow, they instantly gained access to her DNA and were able to solve the mystery. 23andMe denied sharing that information, but the cops were like, yeah, of course they provided it. A much scarier example is of a father who took an at-home DNA test, and it resulted in his son being falsely accused of murder. It turned out that the DNA wasn't accurate, and this false positive could have ended with his son being locked away for the rest of his life, or even worse, put to death. And these are just a few examples. The results could be good or bad. Maybe a crime or a mystery is solved, which is great. Or maybe someone is falsely accused of something that they didn't do. But the issue I'm targeting today is your privacy. Your DNA is being passed around like nobody's business, and no one's doing anything about it. As of just a few days ago, GSK, a British multinational pharmaceutical and biotech company, purchased the rights to all of 23andMe's genetic database for 5 years at the cost of $20 million. Meaning anyone and everyone who submitted their data to 23andMe, well, your data is now the property of GSK, a British multinational pharmaceutical and biotech company, and there's nothing you can do about it. Meaning not only do they have your ancestry and genetic data to do whatever they want with, but you paid them to take it. You paid them money, they happily took your data, and then sold it and made more money. They got paid twice, and you didn't get anything out of it except for an invasion of privacy, maybe one day a faulty criminal prosecution, and God knows what else. Here's the thing, I don't blame anybody for submitting their information to one of these things. It's a really cool idea. In fact, I would love to do it. But this whole situation has always felt so sketchy to me. I was actually given one of these tests a few years back as a gift, and it's still sitting in my drawer to this day. I've always had an unease about just giving away my DNA, and when you see these stories about these companies just selling off your information to anyone and everyone, I can't help but feel vindicated. When it comes to privacy, we get taken advantage of every single day. So even if I lose 400 privacy battles a day, at least I got one win. And that's not much, but that's about all we can expect these days. Absolutely horrifying stuff. We all know your phone and PC collect your data, spy on you, and throw targeted ads at you. But it gets so much worse than that. What if they can actually read your mind? Researchers at the University of Texas, Austin, have created an AI that can translate your brain activity, as in your thoughts, and turn them into words on a screen. Let's hope you're keeping your thoughts clean and sterile. It's called the semantic decoder. It's non-invasive, so there's no surgery, no chips implanted. It simply reads your thoughts and pours out your stream of consciousness into text. It's currently not a word-for-word transcript, but instead the overall essence of what is being thought. One participant listened to the phrase, "I don't have my driver's license yet," and their thought was translated as, "She has not even started to learn how to drive yet." Meaning the participant heard that, thought about it, evolved their understanding of it, and the semantic decoder wrote down her thoughts. Wow. Another creepy example involved a participant listening to the words, "I don't know whether to scream, cry, or run away. Instead, I said, 'Leave me alone.'" The semantic decoder translated the participant's thoughts as, "Started to scream and cry, and then she just said, 'I told you to leave me alone.'" Horrifying and spooky stuff, but you don't have to worry. They promise that this technology will never get into the wrong hands. Not only that, it can't be used on someone who isn't a willing subject. Then again, they say after that if it is used on you against your will, one way to resist the attempt at brain decoding is to think of animals or think of a story in your mind to thwart the system. Very reassuring. It's disturbing enough to hear that this technology exists at all, but then to be told, don't worry, it can't be used against you. But if it is, here's how you can try to counter it. Absolutely horrifying stuff.